What's up, everybody? I hope y'all are having a wonderful day. I'm Anthony. On today's video, we're going to be talking about an American tragedy, one thing that has happened that has completely changed the landscape of America as we know it in the last 100 years. So stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, what tragedy am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the loss of the American chestnut tree. Now, prior to 1900, the chestnut tree was almost a ubiquitous sight in the eastern seaboard, usually ranging from Georgia to Maine. So a lot of times what you're going to see if you walked into the woods was going to be, yeah, you got an oak or you got a cedar, but then most of it was chestnuts. Almost 1 in 4 trees was chestnuts. So around before 1900, before the blight actually showed up, there's probably roughly around 4 billion chestnut trees in the United States. Now, when I mention chestnut, you're probably thinking, okay, this is food, right? It's a food source, and it absolutely is. A lot of deer, turkey, wildlife absolutely loved eating the chestnuts along with people. We were shown very early, hey, yes, you can eat chestnuts. They're very good for you, and they have a lot of antioxidants, okay? They didn't have a lot of fats, not like a pecan or a walnut, but they did have a lot of carbohydrates, and they offered a lot of protective antioxidants to help you, get through winter time. That's one of the best thing about them is they happen to fall in late October and November, so you're able to eat them throughout the winter time. It wasn't just the nuts that made this a valuable resource. It was also the timber. Not only was it a very fast-growing tree, but it was a very tall-growing tree, so much so that it was almost the tallest in the canopy. So you had a lot of wood to work with. Another plus is it was straight grain, so you didn't have to worry about a kind of twisting grain like you would in an elm tree. So is very good to build with. So furniture makers from all over would love to get their hands on some chestnut wood because they could make things like bassinets, kitchen tables, dining room tables, dressers, all kinds of good stuff. And it was rot resistant, so it was used in a lot of foundational building for your house, inward beams, and even caskets. So there's a good chance if you look at some of the older homes built before 1900, one of those beams in there is probably going to be made out of chestnut. So this is the part that I wanted to mention as the tragedy. In 1904, in one of the New York City zoos, one of the keepers noticed a canker on one of the chestnut trees. Now, a canker is just an injury to the tree. However, when he saw this canker, he walked up to it and realized that there was an orangish, fuzzy-looking color surrounding the canker. Called in a botanist, and the botanist said, okay, this tree is sick. We have an issue, but I don't recognize what that issue is. We now know that it was Cryphonectria parasitica, which is a chestnut blight, something that we hadn't seen before, and it was affecting trees faster than they could think. Now, when they found in 1904, it had already been stateside for probably a few decades. They just didn't know about it. But by that point, it was already too late to do anything about it. There were trees that were in this vicinity, in a certain area, that were already infected, and it moved about 50 miles every single year. So by about 1940, the entire eastern seaboard had been affected by the chestnut blight. Now, luckily, I guess by this point, a lot of the really big, vast chestnuts had already been cut down and used for timber, but there were still quite a few of them dominating the forest because, like I said, they regrow from the root level. Now, when they got the chestnut blight, it only affects above soil high, so all the roots are still fine. So when that tree dies from the blight, inevitably, it'll fall over and a new one will grow up. Unfortunately, though, once that blight's around, it's living all around in living things, and it will not go away. So that tree might make it to 10, 15, 20 years and then die again. It's almost doomed in a cycle of repetition. So that's why you don't really see a lot of American chestnuts anymore, because they only get to about a certain height before the blight kills them. Now, I know what some of y'all are thinking. How did that get here in the first place? Just like everything else, we brought it here through trade. So unfortunately, someone decided to bring over some ornamental chestnuts from Asia, not realizing that within that wood held the fungus, the fungal spores that created the blight. So we brought them over here, probably late 1800s, and planted them, and all of a sudden, things started to fall like dominoes. By 1904, when they found it, it was already too late, and the entire area had been infected. It was too late to quarantine, it was too late to do anything. Now, why am I bringing it up on my channel? What is the whole purpose of this video? Well, two reasons. Number one, we have to understand what we're doing to our native plants when we bring in non-natives, okay? Especially invasive non-natives. So you have to think about things not just in terms of trees, but also flowers. By planting things that are not native here, you could be introducing diseases or competition for native varieties, which is not a good thing at all. And number two, This tree was an important food source for people from colonial times to Civil War to the early 1900s. So a lot of times when people were struggling to find food, one of the guarantees they had was, hey, if I can wait till October, November, I'm going to at least have some chestnuts, and that will help us get through the winter time. So if we ever suffer any kind of catastrophic event where we might have to be pushed back to earlier lifestyles, we won't have that cushion of being able to go out and get chestnuts, because guess what? They're all gone. Now I can hear some of the questions now. What do we do about it? Why are you telling about this stuff? Well, there is good news. The last couple years, the last couple decades, there's been a lot of research into some of the remaining chestnut trees. Now when I say remaining, I'm talking about they lived in the highest, most inaccessible parts of the Appalachian Mountains, and yet they were still not affected by the blight. Scientists can't figure out why, no one can really figure out why, but there's a few isolated pockets of trees that survived. Now they were able to take the chestnuts from those trees and almost try to cross them with other strains to see exactly why they had immunity or resistance when others didn't. They're still figuring that out, but what they're doing now is they are cross-pollinating and back-crossing a lot of these trees to build up a resistance in natural American chestnut trees. Now, there are options in terms of if you want to plant a Chinese chestnut at your house, you absolutely can do so. Chinese chestnuts are not affected like American chestnuts. If they do get the blight, they're able to just survive. They may lose a branch or two, but they're still going to be producing chestnuts. Unfortunately, the Chinese chestnut tree is more of a shrub or more of a small tree versus the tall towering chestnuts of the American variety, but it will still give you food if you need it, so you can always plant one of those. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you one of these that I recently planted this year, and this is called a Dunstan chestnut. The Dunstan chestnut was invented by a guy named Dunstan in the 1950s. I say invented, I mean like discovered. It was crossed. And this is an American chestnut variety that has been cross-pollinated to build up a resistance. Now, this is, again, not immune to chestnut blight, but it has a resistance. So what I've ended up doing is I've gone on a place called Chestnut Hill Nursery. I'll put a link down below. And I've ordered myself quite a few of these, and I've scattered them all around the outside perimeter of my property. Basically because I'm trying to bring in deer. That's the whole point of me doing this. Yeah, I'd like to be able to eat some of the chestnuts myself, but I'm doing it more so I can bring in wildlife, because I like to have my property be not only a wildlife refuge, but I also hunt here. So if I can take one or two from the herd while giving food to the rest of them, then I'm going to do that. And that's another good positive plus of this tree. You're able to give mast reliably, because unlike acorns, I may have like a heavy drop one year and a small drop the next year. Chestnuts are known for dropping reliably every single year, so that's why I wanted to talk about it here on this channel. I think I'm going to end the video there. If you want any further reading on the subject, please do me a favor and look down in the description. I will post more about this stuff. This subject is very near and dear to me. That's why I've tried to put a lot of natives on my property to try to avoid and discourage using these ornamental, non-natives, potentially invasive species, because all it's doing is destroying our wildlife and it's destroying our forests. So if we can be a little bit more sustainable, bring in plants that are native to here, we don't have to worry about running near as much water, near as much pesticides, herbicides, all kind of crazy stuff to make sure they stay alive. We can do this the right way naturally. So that's all I wanted to talk about this subject. Hope you learned something. If you did, please do me a humongous favor and give me a thumbs up. It would very much help me out, and I would absolutely appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'll catch y'all later, okay? Bye.